Alright, what's up, guys? Welcome back to day 24 again. This is part 4 of interview prep. I just went to go eat some breakfast. I'm back now. Had a bit of coffee. Feeling more nervous now that it's starting up in 30 minutes, but I think I'm gonna try to run through some last minute questions and just see where we can go from here. So let's see. What are you thinking about when deciding on asset allocation policies? What cause and effect factors? Okay. Yeah, so I guess a few questions I could ask are first about asset allocation policy, and then there's also a target for internally managed assets. Okay, and then is there an actively managed portion of your portfolio? Maybe if I talk a little bit about private equity too, because I think maybe one of the interviewers is going to be in the private equity space. So, hmm. Pension related, what technologies do you guys use? I saw that you guys were using, okay. Yeah, maybe I could ask, so with this shift towards internally managed assets, is there any interesting technology that you guys are building to help support this transition? CIO? Yeah, I mean Chief Information Officer, Chief Investment Officer, nice. Chief Investment Officer. Hey, that's a pretty cool title. Could you maybe tell me, Chief Information Officer? It's a pretty cool title. Do you mind telling me some of the best parts of your job? Yeah, I feel like that's a fair question to ask. All right. If you were the CEO of a company, what company would you choose and why? Wow, that's a hard question. So, maybe when I think about being the CEO of some type of company, I would want it to be fun. I would hopefully I would want it to be fun, and I feel like if I'm a CEO of a publicly traded company, it won't really be that fun. Then my Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of considerations that go into this decision. First, do I want to be a CEO of a publicly traded or a privately traded or a private company? I feel like maybe I would want one. I feel like probably I would want to be the CEO of a private company just so I'm not at the behest of my shareholders and Wall Street, which is probably going to be my biggest shareholder. And then maybe I'll look at the industry in which my company participates in. So I'm really into fashion. So it would be really cool to be part of a fashion company or just a company that manufactures. Hmm. What is that? Yeah, made in USA. Rachel Slade, making it in America. Oh, American Roots, that's what it was. Yeah, so I think maybe. Okay, so I could talk about kind of publicly, private, then the industry that I'm in. Okay. Oh, let me also write some stuff down. My journal. Dominique Cherry, Min, Nitin, Fena. Technology usage. Okay. So I wrote the questions down. Palmer. 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 Chief Investment R. That's TCRS. Tennessee Consolidated Retirement System. Nice. It's cool. Okay. Made in America. CIO. CRS. Okay. So questions. Assets allocation. Best parts of job. Private equity. Maybe views of that. Views of how was this? Views of the future slash. Okay, so questions to ask. Can you tell me a little bit about what you guys are thinking when determining asset allocation policies? Best parts of the job. Yeah, so I feel like there's a bunch of Yeah, I remember skimming through one of the Howard Marks memos. I remember skimming through some of the a memo by Howard Marks, about rise in interest rates and how that might be a sea change for private equity and alternative investments. Do you guys have any opinions on where private equity is going? Where private equity is going as an asset class? Where private equity is going? Do you see diminished returns for the next 10 or so years? Or do you see diminished returns in the next 10, 20 years? And is it going to be relevant within pension plans? Yeah, I feel like it's a good question to ask. Views of the future / market. Yeah, do you guys have any big risk? Anything that you guys are excited for in the future? Anything that you see as risk to the future? Okay. So, yeah, tell me a little bit about how you would evaluate an investment manager. I think maybe starting out in the process, so I'll try to think out loud a bit here. So, when starting out in the process, right? So, yeah, I'll try to think a little bit out loud here. So, starting out, I might ask myself a few different questions. So, first, just trying to figure out what type of asset class this manager specializes in, and then try to answer the question of whether or not this manager has some type of competitive advantage. Maybe they have some type of differentiated strategy or advanced technology, or maybe some just great talent. And then I would probably follow up with, okay, they might have a competitive advantage. If they do, then do I understand what their strategy is? And I think a big point here is just to understand the risk of the manager's strategies. And then finally, I might think about how the fee structure works and maybe how fees can align incentives or how they might not actually align any incentives at all. So maybe I would ask those 4 questions starting out, and just to maybe go through an example. So the question of differentiated or competitive advantage, I feel like that could be answered in many different ways. Maybe you could look at past performance or performance relative to a benchmark. And I'm sure there's a lot of ways to judge past performance. I'm no expert in performance analytics. I'm no expert in performance analytics. 还没有呢，还没有呢。Yeah. Okay. Yeah, maybe I'm okay. Maybe I don't need to say that. To be able to look at past so look at past performance and performance relative to a benchmark. But then there's also the case where maybe there's different ways competitive advantages could come up within different asset classes. I feel like for private equity, a competitive advantage could be that I feel like in private equity, this is something that my professor told us. Seems like most of the top performers in private equity stay at the top, and so that could be a advantage in itself, being kind of one of the top in private equity deal flows and also in previous past returns. If you had a strong history of making deals and making big exits, then it's likely that you'll do that in the future. Okay, and then I'll try to understand some of the strategy that the investment manager has within their investment and within their investment fund. And so I feel like this could also be very broad. This could be different types of strategies with different types of asset classes. And I think the most important part here is to understand what their goal is and also what the risks are involved. And I guess a goal could be to be able to match or beat some type of benchmark. And then the risk involved is how are they going to get there and what type of okay. And I feel like the risk involved could be anything from leverage to the type of securities that are being traded or invested in. Okay. And invested in. And then there comes the idea of fees. So I feel like this is a pretty controversial topic, and I guess the pension fund. I feel like this is a pretty controversial topic within pension funds. So I feel like this is a pretty controversial topic in pension funds, and definitely something where I'm not an expert in, and I feel like there's a lot of different ways to go about this. So first, when I think of fees, probably the biggest ones are going to come from alternative asset managers, hedge funds, private equity manager, because they usually charge some type of carried interest instead of just a fixed 2%, 1% of assets under management or committed capital. So I feel like when evaluating these managers, a carried interest or performance fee does help align incentives to some extent. And I feel like it's important to understand that. Well, I feel like it's important to be able to clear up performance metrics. Well, I feel like it's important to set clear performance metrics, maybe some type of high watermark or some type of hurdle rate that's some type of high watermark or hurdle rates that these investment managers need to hit in order for them to receive their carried interest. Yeah, okay, so that's a pretty long-winded way to answer that question. But okay, that's pretty good. Location shift. Okay. Yeah, I think I think why I enjoy investing so much really came from my parents. They immigrated from China about 30 years ago. They actually moved to Tennessee and started working for University of Tennessee. They actually moved to Tennessee first, which I believe was where you worked at last time before this. And so, and then about 5, 6 years later, and then about 10 years later, they moved to Maryland where they had me. Where they had me. And I think very early on, both my parents wanted my sister and I to go to college, and I think they realized that college was going to be expensive, so they needed to save and invest. So they opened up a Maryland 529 plan for both of us and started saving some of their money and putting it into this account. And then about 20 years later, both my sister actually graduated from college, and now she's doing her MBA. I'm still have about 2 more years left, and then I graduate. But both of us have been able to go to school completely debt free, just by paying off school using the money we've earned in this account. So I feel like that's really why I love investing so much. It really empowers people to be able to afford things like education, and also just allows them to live a better quality of life. Yeah, so okay, that was a interesting way to say that. Market views. Yeah, so my views in the market, I feel like I don't have, I can't, yeah, I definitely can't give a definitive answer on what's going to happen, but I do think that there's kind of this bull bear type of, I do think there is this type of positive negative bull bear type of view going on, and I feel like both sides are fair in the sense that there are reasons to support both sides. So maybe I could start off with the negative outlook. So I feel like there's probably three things to think about here based on what I've read and what I've been. I feel like there's maybe three things to think about here. First is just how the credits and debt system is going in the US. And then also, first is the credit and debt levels and maybe cycles in the US. The second could be the public markets view. And the third, I'd say, is a more global. The first, I'd say, is a credit/debt view. Second is a public markets view. And third is more of a global type view. So I'll start with the debt side. And I feel like right now, the US is facing a record level of debt at the national level, but also at the consumer level. So I think there's maybe 30 plus trillion in national debt and more than 100% debt to income ratio, so debt to GDP. And then on the consumer side, we have more than $1 trillion in outstanding credit card debt. About 45 million Americans are resuming their student loan payments. And then I think the personal savings rate is also pretty low compared to historical averages. Now, on the public markets view, you have, I believe there is so I remember reading a report by FactSet about the most recent earnings quarter, and I saw that some of the consumer discretionary, some firms in the consumer discretionary industry are facing some pressure on their top line growth. So revenues growth is a bit declining and slowing down, and also earnings per share in specific consumer discretionary categories. I believe automobiles and hotels leisure is also declining a little bit. So switching over to the global view, we have a few different conflicts that are happening right now. You have Israel, Palestine, Ukraine, and Russia, and also what's going on with the Red Sea right now and the Houthi rebels, I believe. And then I think a big thing to look at within the next year is how kind of the credit and debt situation in China is going to unfold. I've heard that there's a few big property developers that are liquidating their assets. Property values in China are falling, and the outstanding debts among consumers, states, and local governments, and also the national government, are at maybe unsustainable levels. So those are probably the things that would really catalyze a bear market or a negative outlook in the markets. Now, on the other side, you have the idea of, hey, in the most recent quarter, our GDP, our real GDP, grew about 3%, which is pretty strong. And inflation is falling down to pretty much 2%. The Fed is predicting probably a 25-50 basis point cut in the target federal funds rate within the next year. The timing of that is a bit uncertain, probably the end of the year, towards the end of the year, maybe the last half of the year. But when you look at the public markets, the same FactSet report also showed that a lot of earnings per share surprises, positive earnings per share surprises happen across many different industries, and seems like earnings for different Fortune 500 or S&P 500 companies are pretty strong. And so I feel like there's definitely support on both sides for what could happen in terms of negative versus positive outlook. I would say maybe I'm leaning a bit towards the negative, although maybe just 5% more. So, yeah, I think it's a toss up, really. Oh, okay. Oh, also commercial property. Oh, yeah, so there's also the commercial property. Okay. All right. I think I might call it quits here for now. I'm gonna go pee real quick and then just relax for the next 10 minutes and then hop on the call. So yeah, I'm excited. So see you guys after the interview.